This is a tutorial on the new buyer representation agreement drafted for 2024. Now it's only 2 pages, but it packs a punch and serves its intended purpose. It can be used in any state. I think these will be more widely used, especially considering the Sitzer-Burnett verdict. But we'll jump right into it. Also, after this, I'm going to show you a different form, a proprietary form, and I'll link to both of these in the description. And if this is too much for your buyer, you can always use this property showing agreement, and I'll show you that after this. But let's start with the tutorial on this form itself. It's very simple, very straightforward. We'll jump right into it here. So we have the name of the buyer or buyers. Then you're going to put your brokerage name here on line 3. Representation period begins when this form is executed, meaning both sides, the broker and brokerage, because you can sign, and the buyers have both signed until this date. It's very important that you have an expiration date of the representation period. If you leave this blank, this makes this form voidable. So you want to have an end to the representation period. Now, I've shown here 3 different ways that you can write the range of property that's going to be covered by this agreement. And this actually came up in another YouTube video I did where there was a debate in the comments about how specific or how vague. And one person said if it's too vague, then it may not hold up in court. I think that's a great point. Another person said, yes, it should be as specific as possible. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but it's more of understanding why you want to be vague or specific, and then it's up to your judgment. Because if it's just pertaining to one property, put the property address, and that is very specific. So in that case, yes, it's important to be specific. But often when you're working with a buyer, they're not just looking at one place. They're looking at a range of homes in a certain area, geographic area. So my recommendation is to keep that geographic area wide, but not so wide as to where it goes beyond your scope of practice. So you could say the city of Irvine, but I don't even like limiting it to one city, because what if the buyer ends up buying a home right on the edge of the neighboring city? Or they're looking more for the school district, and the school district happens to go into the neighboring city a little bit in a small area, and so they end up buying a neighboring city. And you thought, wait, I thought you wanted to be here. So why limit it to that? Personally, I would probably do something like this. Orange County, I mean, geographically, it's not huge. It's not like Riverside County or San Bernardino County where it's gigantic, but it's large enough to where you can say, yeah, I service all of Orange County, because there are agents that can geographically service that entire county with reasonable effort. So here's the metric. What is the largest area that you can reasonably service in your scope of practice? Because that is what I think is going to be a defining factor if a buyer contested it and said, no, this agent doesn't service this area. I mean, if you write all of the state of California, well, it covers all of California, but the problem is if the buyer says, we actually got a different job opportunity in another area, another county, or Northern California, and this agent's in Southern California, well, the agent's going to lose, because that's reaching too far. What agent can live in Southern California and properly service a city that's hundreds of miles away? That's absurd. So that's why being too vague or having too wide of a geographic area can be a problem. So just want to put this out there, and then you can make your judgment. But just consider the metric of where you can reasonably service. Okay, compensation. By default, it's a percentage of the sales price. So we just write that here. But if it's not, then just check one of these boxes. You can say it's a flat fee, or it's a percentage and a flat fee, and you can make up whatever you want here. I mean, you could put, gold coins if you want. It doesn't matter. But the point is that you're going to put your compensation here, and by default, this is what we typically see, maybe 3%, maybe 2%, whatever. But you're going to put the percentage here. Now, naturally, a buyer is going to get nervous if they see this and say, wait, I have to pay you? Well, first off, if you're presenting this, you have to have a conversation with your client and explain to them that you're working on speculation. You pay dues to multiple boards, national, state, and local, MLS, etc. You have fees. You're in business. You're paying expenses to get licensed, etc. You know firsthand of what you've gone through to get to this far. And you can reassure them and say this, line 25. I'll start here. I'll go through this, but line 25 is where you're going to point to right after you have this conversation with your client about how much compensation you're entitled to as their representative, okay? So basically it says that during the representation period, the buyer agrees to only use broker, capital B, meaning the broker mentioned above, as their real estate representative. This is an exclusive relationship. And compensation's due upon successful completion of the transaction. How's that defined? Well, when the buyer's recorded as the new owner. So after recording, that's successful completion. Now it says 25, this is going to offer some relief to the buyer. Any compensation paid to the broker from the listing brokerage as a cooperating broker commission shall be deducted from the amount due to the buyer stipulated in this agreement. So if you put 2.5 and there's a cooperating broker commission of 2.5%, it cancels this out. The buyer owes you nothing because you're being paid from the seller's side. The reason why this is more of an issue is because part of that verdict, the Sitzer-Burnett verdict, was there's an implication that it may affect whether or not sellers pay a buyer's agent commission in the gross commission they pay the listing brokerage. That's a whole separate topic. I won't get into it here. But the point is that for now, and I even checked, I did a search on the MLS this morning, and I pulled up hundreds and hundreds of listings just to see if there's been any change yet. There isn't. There isn't any change to the cooperating broker commission. It's because the MLS doesn't require you to offer anything now. It can be zero. It used to not be that case. That used to not be the case. So the point is that to this day, there's still a cooperating broker compensation. If you go in the MLS, all these listings still are offering 2.5%, 3% to a buyer's agent. So you can tell your client, hey, what I'm charging here is in the case that there is no cooperating broker compensation, I need to be paid for my services. I don't work for free. I will likely be paid from the listing agent, but that's not guaranteed. So, and 25 deducts whatever you as the buyer's agent collect from the listing agent. So that's the conversation that you need to have with them. All right, now what happens if this expires and then the next day they go into escrow on a property you showed? Well, this is a protection for you. This says if within 30 days by default, if this period ends and the buyer goes into escrow on a property that you marketed to them, you showed it to them or whatever, well, this extends this representation agreement to cover that. So you can extend this too. If you want to be more bold, you could put 60 or 90 or something like that. But we just have 30 as a standard, and I think that's fine, but it's entirely up to you. But this just protects you so that you don't show a property the day before this expiration up here, and then the buyer go into escrow on it, and then you lose out. That would be bad. Broker duty, just an advisory, what a broker does. Dispute resolution. There's an issue. Okay, so parties initial, page 1 of 2. If there's an issue, the parties go to mediation. They don't sue you. They don't say, I'm not happy with you, I'm going to sue you. Ideally, they'll contact your broker and say, I'm having an issue, and your broker can get involved and possibly bring another agent in and still pay you for your time. But this protects everyone from just turning into a huge litigation mess. Now, you can also do arbitration, meaning if mediation isn't sufficient to resolve the dispute, you can escalate it to arbitration. I recommend the parties everyone initial here, but it's up to you guys. Buyers are going to put their info in here. As the broker info, you'll put the brokerage name. You don't need the broker's signature. You as the agent can initial. You can write your name here, and you can sign here, and that's it. It's 2 pages, but it's highly, highly effective. And it's less intimidating than some of the realtor forms that are multiple pages. And it's a bit much to hand off. It's kind of like giving a prenup out on a first date. It's a little overwhelming to a buyer client. Okay, now as unassuming as this dainty 2-page form might be, There's another option, and this is something I recommend. I've used myself for many years, and this is a property showing agreement. This is just one page, and this is the least intimidating. And we'll go through it, but you're going to put your name there. Let's say Amy agent. Okay, buyer understands that, and we put the agent's name here, is allocating considerable time and resources to facilitate the showing of this property. Okay, so you're investing your time, energy, money, whatever, into facilitating a showing, right? You're driving somewhere to open a property for someone. That's important. You're a licensed person that's showing up as a professional. Now, it says here that on this particular property, because you're showing up, you are going to be the exclusive representative. Now, if there's a protection clause in here too. Hey, if the buyer doesn't like you for some reason, if they find you off-putting, if you accidentally say something that's offensive, well, that's not in itself grounds for dismissal of what you've invested. The buyer should contact your broker. Any concern the buyer has with the agent shall be directed to the company office for remedy and does not nullify this obligation. If an agent shows up with bad breath and the buyer complains it's not good enough, they need to call the broker and then ask for a different agent or help. But basically this says this agreement pertains to only the property locations mentioned below and does not obligate the buyer to use you on other properties not mentioned here. So this is a property showing agreement that says that you don't have to use me as an agent. Now this one does. This says we're married. I'm your agent. You're stuck with me. In fact, there's even a provision here that says that even if if the agent doesn't participate, it's somewhere here. But even if you don't, if they try cutting you out and they go with another agent, you're still entitled to it. This doesn't. This just says, I don't care what you do with other agents or other properties, but on these properties that I showed up for, I'm going to be your agent, and you put it in here. And what I used to do is I used to put a property address. So if someone called the office and I answered the phone and they said, I want to go see such and such property, I would go out and I would have this on a clipboard and I'd have them sign it before we entered the premises. And I'd tell them, so I'm not asking to be your exclusive agent, use whomever you want on other properties, but since we're out here today, since we're having a meeting here, I'm showing this property to you. I've been communicating with the listing agent. If you proceed, I represent you on this purchase. That's what this form is. And so you'll have them sign acknowledging it. Now, what recourse do you have if they try to cut you out? Well, against them, not really anything. Now, they've made a mental commitment. They've signed a form with you. So that alone is going to diminish the probability of them cutting you out. It won't eliminate it entirely, but it'll diminish that probability. Now, the other side of it, though, is this does show procuring cause. So if you catch wind of them proceeding on a property that you showed here, and you send this to the other agent, that agent's not going to want the potential ethics claim that you could file by being the procuring cause and having documented proof of it here. So it's not entirely toothless. It does have a little bit of recourse and leverage toward another agent that is helping this person, this client, cut you out. But it's not ironclad. This is the most watered down, diluted version. But it's better than nothing because you honestly should not open a property for a client unless you have something, even this basic form, in writing. Ideally this. And line 25, 26, that should eliminate any sort of concern that the buyer has. At the end of the day, you don't work for free, and this is very time consuming. Setting up meetings, driving your car to places. This isn't free. This isn't a nonprofit. Here's the provision, by the way, notwithstanding whether the broker actually participated. That means that if you try to see, buyer's obligated to compensate broker. Now, if they didn't, they're still obligated, whether or not you participated. That just says, try to cut me out, you still owe me because we're married, baby. That's what this form is. Okay, I'm going to link to both of these forms in the description. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. Thank you.